أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن طعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي آمين يا رب العالمين ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We are going to talk about hitting women, inshallah. Yeah, hitting women. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a very well-known and sahih hadith narration, says, "La tadribu ima Allah." Do not hit the female slaves of Allah. That is the sunnah policy. Do not hit the female slaves of Allah. Now, which woman is not the female slave of Allah? None of them. All human beings are the slaves of Allah. So don't hit women is basically what Allah said, or what the Messenger said, alayhi salatu wasalam. But the way he used the language, because as opposed to saying, "La tadribu nisa," "La tadribu an-nisa," don't hit women. He said, don't hit the slaves of Allah, the female slaves of Allah, ima Allah. What difference does it make? For hitting a slave, like if I hit somebody else's slave, I'll get in trouble with who? The master. Wait, who are you to hit him? That's his slave. The fact that he attributed their slavery to Allah actually makes it a problem for someone to hit women, because now they are going to have to deal with Allah Azza wa Jal. First thing I want to tell you is Allah Azza wa Jal talks about how people ignore or overlook or even bury some parts of the book. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in parts of the book and disbelieve in other parts? الَّذِينَ جَعَلُوا الْقُرْآنَ عِزِينَ. They took the Qur'an and broke it, tore it into pieces. So people like to look at part of the Qur'an and not look at other parts, and that is an injustice to the Qur'an. A surah, I keep telling you guys, a surah is a unified speech of Allah. It's one whole. You cannot take an ayah out of a surah and say that I understand it without understanding fully what's going on in the rest of the surah. Like, this is Allah's organization. This is how Allah organized His speech. But even a bigger crime than that is when people don't even look at the entire ayah. Forget, I'm not going to look at the surah. I'm not even going to look at the entire ayah. That's one ayah. Part of it is وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, hit them. What's the only part people talk about? Hit them. If you don't understand the rest of the ayah, you can't make sense of what Allah is saying. Ayah number 34, Surah An-Nisa. So what I want to start with, first of all, you have to consider the entire surah. Remember that? Okay, let's talk about that. Allah in the beginning talks about polygamy. How did Allah talk about polygamy? The way Allah talked about it is not a man can marry 4 women. That's how we talk about it. The way Allah talked about it is, if you have girls, orphans in your home, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. If you're afraid you won't be able to do justice among the orphan girls, then you can marry 1 or 2 each, 3 each, or 4 each. So the scenario is somebody is raising women in their house that were orphans. 2, 3, 4, 5. And he, in order to make sure that the relationship is legitimate, can marry up to how many? Okay. Is this a normal situation? Somebody raising orphan girls up to women? No. Okay, but the way the law was introduced was through a very unusual situation. Is that much clear? Then Allah talks about inheritance, which happens at the time of death. Is death an everyday thing or a very unusual case in a family? It's very unusual, very once in a lifetime thing. Then Allah talks about the strangest thing. He says, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ. Oh my goodness. Your mothers, your daughters, your aunts, your nieces, etc., they're haram for you to marry. Why would he even say that? He says that because there are extreme, rare, crazy cases where somebody has psychological problems. Allah has to deal with the extreme circumstances because that craziness might exist. You and I read that ayah and say, why would I ever even have that problem? You can't marry your sister, you can't marry your aunt, you can't marry your mother. Why would Allah even say that? He would say that because there are people who have Those kinds of issues. You know? So what I'm trying to tell you is from beginning to end, when the laws are mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, they are the unusual cases. They are the rare circumstances. That is actually the standard of the ayat of Sharia pretty much. It's not dealing with everyday things. If you study the entire surah, you'll find that because not normal situations are talked about, in that light, in that context, this ayah is not talking about what? A normal circumstance. It's not. So we need to understand what circumstance is it talking about. So here's how it goes. Men are caretakers of women. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are caretakers over women. Okay. Some people have looked at the word qawam and have assumed this to mean men are authorities over women. The problem is, the word qawam has nothing to do with authority. The word qawam actually has to do with maintenance and taking care of something. It is the same origin from which we get the word al-qayyum, the name of Allah, who takes care of all creation, the one who maintains all creation. Allah, men are maintainers over women. They take care of women. They maintain their protection. They maintain their dignity. Now, who's been given the responsibility in this ayah? Men have. So who's the beneficiary? Women are the beneficiary in this ayah. بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Listen carefully. Based on Allah having preferred some over others. When you say بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, it actually only translates into some over others. Some over others. Now what in the world does that mean? It actually means that Allah gave preference to women in the case that they receive benefits. They don't have to take care. They don't have to provide. Why? Because Allah gave them the benefit that they don't have to provide. Allah gave men certain advantages. And it seems in this beginning of this ayah, actually, Allah has given an advantage to who? Women. Allah is saying, by the way, some of them have been given preference over others. In some things, men have a preference. In other things, women have a preference. وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. And because of what they have to spend from their money. Now you could think of they have a degree over them because they have to spend. Yes, in some things they have a degree. They have authority in the home. They're the Amir of the house. But as a matter of fact, they have an advantage because Allah says they're the ones that have to spend. Women don't have to spend. She doesn't have to spend from her savings. She doesn't have to spend from her income. He has to spend. So who's got the advantage? In some sense, in some authority or in some decision making, men have an advantage, but in actually taking care of the finance or being a recipient of the finances and a beneficiary, the woman has the advantage. He's not doing her a favor by taking care of her. Allah made him a qawam. He's doing his job. You know, وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. Now he says, now that you have been, and by the way, this is what Allah does. Whenever He gives someone an advantage, every time He gives someone an advantage, He immediately talks about their responsibilities. Something Allah does all the time. As soon as He talks about your rights, He'll talk about your what? Responsibilities. Because then what happens is people become obsessed with their rights and they forgo their responsibilities. So it seems women have been given some rights here. They have to be taken care of. They have to be spent on. Yeah? By the men. They're doing all the work right now. They're doing the caretaking and they're doing the spending. So now what are the responsibilities of women? فَالصَّالِحَات, good women, قَانِتَاتٌ, they're subservient. Some argue subservient to Allah because qunut only comes with Allah. But also in being subservient to Allah, they're also being subservient reasonably to their husbands. In other words, they listen to their husband. If their husband's asking them not to go out late at night, they listen. If he's saying, maybe you shouldn't go with these people, I don't like that group, or I don't like the way they have their gatherings, etc. She should listen to that. She should listen to some. She shouldn't just say, where's your hadith? Where's the fatwa? Husband and wife can have a conversation. He could say, you got that job offer, but it's a very long commute. You're not going to get home until midnight every day. Maybe you should look for another job. And she says, but I really like that job, and maybe you should discuss it, but you should take his advice more seriously. This is part of qunut. But then there's also, and by the way, qanit also means willingness to obey. Some mufassirun argue it's primarily willingness to obey to Allah. حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. They guard the unseen on account of what Allah wanted guarded, or what Allah guarded. Now what does that mean? I'll share the primary meaning and some secondary meanings with you. The primary meaning is that women are in the unseen of their homes. They're in the privacy of their homes. when the man is out to work. And much of the time, what she does is she knows. The conversations she has, she knows. Her friends know, nobody else knows. The husband doesn't know. And the biggest thing that she's guarding is the dignity and the trust of her husband. She's guarding the respect of that entire household. So if she is loyal to her husband, she's not, flirting with other men, ma'adallah, or having an affair or this and that. She's guarding the unseen. She's not allowing some man to come into the house, or worse. She's not doing any of that. Then she's guarding the unseen. Is that much clear? That's the primary meaning here, that they are loyal wives. They're loyal to their men. They're loyal to their husbands. Okay? The second meaning is actually that women, Allah is describing a quality of them. Some women actually have much more concern for the unseen than men do. Not in the imani sense, but even in the imani sense sometimes, but actually in just generally as a psychological thing. For example, you're about to buy a car as a family. The husband goes, sits in the car, vroom, vroom. Okay, let's do it. The wife sitting next to him says, wait, can we talk about this? What about? And there's a hesitation. The man wants to do what? Let's do it. And the woman says what? No, wait, let's look at some other options, or can we think about this? Do we really need it? And he gets upset. What do you mean, we really need it? I already discussed this with you. We really need it. I really need it. I really need this one. When you're about to buy a house, who has the major reluctance? The woman does. Are we sure about this one? The husband's like, well, look, we've seen 30 homes. I'm tired. We're getting this one. I'm done. The guy was ready to buy the first one. Because the woman says, what about the future? What about, we don't know everything about the neighbors. We don't know this, we don't know this, we don't know this. She gets worried about a lot of the unknowns, the things that are in the unseen, and she wants to protect what is in the unseen. And the husband wants to what? Jump in, we'll deal with it later. And actually, this is how men and women balance each other. One of the ways they balance each other is, he just wants to jump into everything, and she wants to what? Pull him back a little bit, and that's how they balance each other out. If you just leave it to women, then you're not going to get anywhere, because you're just going to, I'm not sure. If you just leave it to men, you're going to end up in a lot of bad situations. You need the both of them to balance each other out. Is that understandable? That's hafidhatun lil ghaib. They guard what they can't see. They're protective of things. But anyway, that's the primary meaning was what? Loyalty. Right? And the second, that reluctance of unknown factors. Wallati, and those women, takhafuna nushuzahunna, that you are afraid of their uprising. Nashaza or nushuz is actually uprising. When something jumps up, like water boils out, that's called nushuz too. Okay? Now, nushuz is if you're afraid of their uprising. First question that arises, there's a number of questions. The first one that arises is, when is a man ever afraid? Normally, when is a husband afraid that the wife is not going to listen to something? Like, if husbands are such authorities, then when the wife doesn't listen, they get upset, they get angry, they get depressed, they get sad, but they don't get what? Fear is a strange word here, because we don't associate the disobedience of a woman, men don't associate the disobedience of a woman with fear. So the first question is, why is fear being used here? Takhafuna. The second real question is actually use of the word nushuz. What does uprising mean? In this ayah, on the one hand, there are good women. How were they described? Righteous, they do good deeds, they're subservient, they guard the unseen. 3 qualities, yes? The third and the climactic quality was what? They guard the unseen, which primarily means they are loyal to their husbands. Now let me tell you, if there's one thing a husband might get scared of, is that she's thinking about someone else. Scares the life out of him. Scares the life out of him. If you're afraid of an uprising in terms of the loyalty of your spouses. Where are we getting this from? From the ayah itself. Their shame is turning into shamelessness. And by the way, when the women, they came to give bay'ah to the Prophet ﷺ, لَا يَسْرِقْنَا وَلَا يَزْنِينَ, immediately. They're not going to steal, they're not going to do zina. Like, who comes to the Prophet ﷺ? They should, they first said, we're not going to do shirk. We won't steal and we won't do zina. Why? Because that's actually something that's terrifying to the husbands. That's a terrifying thought. It's the most painful thing, The Prophet ﷺ would describe it as the closest thing in this dunya to Jahannam for a man. Which helps you understand why fear is being used. Because we're afraid of Jahannam. Right? He doesn't have evidence. In this ayah, he does not have evidence. But should he bring up his concern? Yeah. So he brings up his concern in what language? فَعِذُوهُنَّ. Counsel them. Advise them. Listen, I don't like you're working too late. You're doing too much overtime. And I don't know why you're texting that. Why is he texting you so much? I know you guys went to the same college, but why is he texting you? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? I know you think it's harmless, but I don't like it. He tries to advise her. Nothing changes. He notices more things. What does he do? وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. Leave them in the beds. Now a woman, when a husband doesn't sleep in the same bed, is supposed to be traumatized. It's supposed to be the worst punishment for a loving wife that the husband won't sleep in the same bed. He purposely goes and sleeps on the couch. He purposely goes and sleeps with the kids and leaves her in the bed alone is a form of torture. But he's so disgusted with her behavior. And he's noticing more and more things. She's dressing up more and more when she goes out. She's coming back home later and later and later. She's not giving him time. And he's just disturbed by it. And he just can't get himself to lie down next to her. If there's any ounce of goodness left in her, what's she going to do? She's going to come over and say, come to bed. Why are you sleeping over there? She'd do that. And then they'll give them a chance to talk. But if she's okay with him sleeping away, if she's okay with that, and she says, more room for me, then she's already starting to get emotionally divorced. She's comfortable with her man not being next to her. That's a very serious problem. Now he notices that she doesn't have a problem. I've been a month, I've been in bed and I've been on the couch and she didn't even once get bothered by it. Not once did she say, why don't you come to bed? Not once. And I advised her about those things and those things are still continuing. His fears are getting worse. And finally, he can't take it anymore. And he hits her. She was going out, he saw the guy, something, situation came and he actually what? How could you do this? And he hit her. Why did he hit her? What's the context of it? Is the context she didn't put enough sugar in the tea? She didn't put enough salt in the nasi lemak? She didn't, she didn't finish the laundry? Or, he told her to do the bills and she didn't do the bills. Why did he hit her? It got out of hand to the point where he couldn't take it anymore. He completely lost it and he ended up what? Hitting her. Over and over or one time? Well, and by the way, if that happens. If this ayah was not there, imagine this ayah was not there. Any husband, any religion, any society, if they were in that situation, things would get ugly. At the very least, he would grab her and say, what are you doing, woman? How can you do this to me? So, if he's emotionally attached to her, if she's the mother of his kids, if she's a family, then something will get out of hand. By the way, in the United States, when a boyfriend catches his girl cheating or text messages or whatever, what happens? They kill them. They call them crimes of passion. Bones are broken, hospitalizations, comas, murders, all in the name of crime of passion. You know what that means? This urge of a man to protect his woman or to not be able to stand infidelity is so powerful that it can drive a person to murder. Realistically speaking, this ayah or not, that's the nature of a man. If he's completely given himself to this woman and she does this to him, he's going to lose it. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't give him the license to kill or to injure or to murder. But He says, if it got a hand and you let go of your hand, I'm going to let you get away with that one. Allah is speaking to the fitrah of the human being. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ If they start obeying you, in other words, they leave their bad ways, they leave the nushuz, they come back to you, فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا Then don't make a case against them. Don't keep following them around until you find evidence and then see if you can be the witness to it, and then you can accuse them. Recover your trust. Recover your trust. Because you don't have explicit evidence, you can still restore this relationship. فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ And by the way, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا Oh my God, what an ending. No doubt Allah has always been the ultimately high. When a man is about to hit a woman, he thinks he's in a higher position. And Allah reminds him by the end of the ayah, He is the ultimately high. And He is the ultimately big. Kabira. He is the ultimately great. Know your place. You're still a slave. Then come back to the policy of the Prophet ﷺ. La tadribu ima Allah. Don't hit the female slaves of Allah. Now you understand that policy is the general rule. And then Quran will give you the extreme circumstance of the exception. What have the Muslims done? What have we done with this ayah? We've described this as a normal rule. It's not normal. Not in the context of the ayat. Now I'll tell you one more thing. And this is what I'll conclude with, inshallah. The next step after this, if things got physical, that means it's gone too far. Now there's no hope left. You need to just let it go. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا If you really feel that kind of schism happening between the two of them, if you feel things might get to a point where they might even become physical, فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا Then you should appoint a good decision maker from his family and a good wise decision maker from her family. They can reconcile. If they have any intention to make things work out, then Allah will يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا Allah will make union between them. They cannot solve their problems on their own anymore. You have to bring outside intervention. Is that clear? You have to bring outside intervention now. Because things are getting now dangerous. They're getting dangerous now. You're playing with fire now. Because you're playing with very intense emotions. If it came to the point where it even came close, even hitting, then that means it might even turn into murder. Who knows? It can get too far. And this is very real. It happens every day in humanity. We're not talking some philosophical theory. This is reality. Now the thing is, all of this was about a woman going bad. Wasn't it? And if she goes bad, there are basically 4 steps. Advise her, separate the bed. If things got physical, maybe once, I'll let you get away with it. Then get outside intervention too. By the way, not hit her and then get outside intervention. Actually, Allah talks to all of us and says, if you're noticing things going bad, in khiftum, if all of you notice a schism between them, a crack between them, you get outside help for them. Because they may not want to get it. They might be okay with it. They don't want to get it. So you have to intervene and get outside help for them before things get really bad. Now, 4 steps, yes? On the other side, what if the husband have nushuz? This is the wife having nushuz. She's getting out of hand. But the husband could also have what? But the nushuz of the husband and the nushuz of the wife are 2 different things. A wife is not so afraid of the same thing that the husband is afraid of. Actually, the thing to fear in a husband is actually much worse. He's actually capable of physical abuse, psychological abuse and physical abuse, much more. He's physically more powerful than the woman. He could hit her, he could beat her up. He could do worse. And this, by the way, is this theory or happens every day? Allah says, وَإِنِّ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا نُشُوزًا Later on in the same surah, if a woman is afraid of the same nushuz, some kind of nushuz from her husband, immediately get outside help. With the woman, how many steps were there? 4. With the man, go get help immediately. Why? Because it can become a life and death situation in the blink of an eye. Now you know this is a reality because the woman who's being abused, she feels like she has nobody to talk to. And she gets scared that if she talks to anybody else, he's going to go, if he's crazy now, If she talks to anybody else, he's going to go really crazy. He's going to kill me if anybody finds out. People ask her about the marks on her face. She says, I fell down the stairs. They ask her again. She says, I'm taking a boxing class. You know, she lies and lies and lies. She can't come up with more lies because she's not just loyal to her husband. She's terrified if anybody finds out the truth, he's going to go really crazy. What is Allah saying? Actually making the community responsible. You have to come and intervene right away. You have to come and intervene. This is the Sharia of Allah. This is the law of Allah, what He revealed. Every rule of Allah, if understood properly, appeals to your fitrah. This deen is a deen of fitrah. And if you understand any hukum of Allah, if you give it the time to understand it, immediately something in your heart will be like, okay, I'm at ease now. That makes sense.